I should have actually recorded that. We should have used it.
Right, we can do it again.
Yeah, no, we can do it again. Hello and welcome to the special 2020 wrap of Great Things with Great Tech. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and this podcast is all about companies doing great things with great technology. And today, it's Christmas. And I have Ben Young with me from vBridge. Ben was actually on episode 2 of Great Things with Great Tech, but I decided to get Ben back and just kind of do a end of year review, talk a little bit about the show. Welcome to the actual end of year, Ben.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good to be back on here. And I hear the two countries are going to have a travel bubble soon, so maybe we'll be able to go get a beer and meet in the middle somewhere.
Maybe I can finally get down to Christchurch.
Yeah, bring it on. Yep.
No, that's very exciting. And look, what a year it's been. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think that we're already in, where's my Christmas lights over there? I got that right first go. There you go. So I got the Christmas lights on. It's like a week and a half to Christmas. It's crazy to think this year's gone so quickly. So much has changed. And I think the great thing about it was that it gave a lot of people the opportunity to do something new and something different. And this is certainly what Great Things with Great Tech gave me the opportunity to do. And, now that we look back, I think I started this in June, looking back at the episode list and managed to get through 16 episodes, which, for me was amazing. I didn't actually think I'd get through that many, didn't think where it was going to go when I started it. But yeah, it's been a really good run, some really great companies on the show. Definitely a little bit different to what I thought it was going to be when I first started it. I mean, Ben, you and I talked about this early on, even before the show, when I was talking about ideas, and it's why I wanted to get you back. I mean, what's your take on the show, just to start with? Because you obviously knew the idea to start with. You're on episode 2, but we hadn't really set the format in stone. There was the basics of it, the skeleton, and it's kind of evolved a little bit since then. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, I know when you first approached me with the idea and the concept and how it was going to play out, and I guess that's kind of the initial concept was how the first few episodes were, but it's been interesting to see how it's grown. And I think I initially thought that it'd just be a lot of service providers or people using this exact same things. And although there has been a lot of crossover, there's also been a lot of companies that I'd never even heard before doing, right from crazy scale out file systems to the exabytes times a million or whatever it was, through the service providers doing great DR products. A lot of automation, a lot of AI, like everything. There's a lot of technology being used in a lot of different industries. So it's been really, really fun to watch play out over the year.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting is obviously it was easy for me where I came from and my background in service provider land to kind of lend on the relationships that I'd built, like yourself. And obviously through the years in the service provider industry, I've made a lot of great contacts, know about a lot of great companies, and leveraging also what I do with VM, working in that space as a focus. It would have been quite easy just to kind of say, let's do every week or every episode as a service provider, because there are literally thousands out there, right? But then, I think what I wanted to do was to make sure that it was differentiated a little bit. And, the one worry was that we were going to have the same conversation every week. But I think, like you said, even though, like in the service provider land, there's people working with the same underlying technologies. I think even, Dirk last week on virtual systems, I think said it actually quite well. He said, everyone has the same base platform, almost the same set of tools, same bit of software, but then you get different people innovating in different ways on top of that software. And I think that's been a theme that we've seen, like you mentioned, AI, the orchestration element of it. And everyone is different and everyone's attacking the same problem in slightly different ways, resulting in slightly different services. I look at what you guys are doing at vBridge. I look at Zettagrid. I've done guys like iLand. I've done Probax, OffsiteDatasync, which is just a focus on DR in itself. Everyone's doing things slightly differently, but I think that's the nature of what I wanted to achieve here. I wanted to achieve the companies being able to tell their stories and basically get to the listeners what they're doing with the technology, right? It's all about, I think I mentioned in the first episode, the seed episode, we all sort of stand on the shoulders of giants in this industry. And the great example is obviously what we do in service provider land. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, definitely. And I actually think the reverse is true too, that a lot of the big giants can learn a lot from the people like us that are building technologies and solutions for problems that we've got with, I guess the generic product, so to speak. Certainly in service provider world, but equally so, we obviously get to consume a lot of great products from these big companies that have massive engineering teams. We can just buy it as a off-the-shelf product and start utilizing those products and services straight away. So definitely both ways, I think, but equally back the other way, and hopefully that feedback loop gets back. It doesn't always, but a lot of the time it does get through, through the various different expert type programs, where we can, people like us or any of the other experts in those fields can start feeding back up through to these giants, so to speak, and then hopefully it eventually trickles down to everyone else that they can consume.
Yeah, and you're very right, because I think about, what you do. I think about the Webair episode with Siggy, just pushing the boundaries of what is possible with the software, and that in turn, like you said, then makes the vendors, the bigger guys, react to that and maybe think about their software a little bit differently. It's very hard to sort of get every corner case, every use case that you would think about as a product developer, as an R&D research guy yourself, and sometimes the software just doesn't crank the way that you want it to, and then that's that feedback loop, right? So you're completely right. It's definitely bilateral, and we say in the VM product strategy team that we are that conduit and that link between the end customer and the actual product development team and R&D. So you're right. And when I think back at it as well, like you mentioned the differentiator, like I think about actually what we'll do is I wanted to sort of ask you, what your favorite episodes were, and maybe let's start with that, because I know what my favorite episodes were. Not that I want to sort of play favorites, because I think everyone was great in its own way, but certainly for me, I had some highlights through the first sort of 6 months, 16 episodes. What about you? What was your kind of standout episodes?
Yeah, without naming specific companies of episodes, I really enjoyed listening to the service provider specific episodes, because it was really interesting listening to all the similarities that everyone has, but then how different they all implemented it and the different challenges they were trying to kind of solve with their platform or software or products or service. And I'm not sure if that's just due to size or geography or a bit of both, but certainly they were all very different, yet all using kind of the standard VMware VM whatever stack sitting on top. So that was really interesting, listening to all the intricacies there, even under what sort of hardware they're using, HPE, and then hearing someone else go, oh, we hate HPE, but we like this. It's been different experiences, and that was really interesting. Obviously I liked all of the pieces around the automation side. That just generally excites me. As you know,
do love your automation. You are an automation man, and actually bloody brilliant at some stuff as well. You should. So I'm going to put some links in the show notes for some of the stuff that you've done over the last couple of months. Have a look, folks, because it's pretty crazy what Ben gets up to.
Yeah, and the AI, I think, theme coming through, even on various different products, like the sort of analyzer was Runecast, wasn't it? Yeah. That sort of analyzes your environment, and obviously that started out without AI, but now they're utilizing AI.
That's right.
So I think those themes, and that was mentioned on several different episodes. So I think we're going to see more of that coming through, and it's a field I'm definitely not an expert in, not even close, but I have a general interest in. So it's certainly something that, I'll be keeping an eye on in that space. And then the security theme was big too. Obviously, Runecast has an element to that, but a lot of the other providers, be it through their services, talked about security. And I think, even the SolarWinds thing that's flared up over the last few days. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Yeah. I looked through.
That is scary. For those that might not know, just because it is actually an interesting conversation, like SolarWinds effectively had almost like a Trojan implanted into their software, which impacted, I think, 1,800 or 18,000 customers out of their 300,000, the majority of which were US-based government. So pretty scary, but that's a very strong sort of risk that is there now. And I don't quite know the full background as to how that Trojan got in there. I think I've got a little bit of an idea, but I don't want to sort of, say anything about that specifically. But yeah, it's scary. So you're right. Security was a massive theme that I picked up on. A lot of the providers are looking to offer some sort of security as a service. I think iLand, had something that plugs into your environment and basically does a sweep of your environment and gives you information about what's happening. I think they're using Trend Micro Deep Analytics as well on their platform as a specific technology. And then even Dirk last week from Virtual Systems, one of their big specialities was basically offering security as a service and wrapping that around their managed service because, and this is something I didn't know until last week, Ben, as well, is that in America, I don't think it's really, I don't know if you found out lately in ANZ or in New Zealand, but effectively a lot of companies are taking out cyber insurance. And as part of that, they need to basically prove that they've got a proper tested and validated DR as well.
Yeah, we get a little bit of that here. We feed into a few customers that either are taking out or looking to take out those sorts of policies. So it's definitely going to be the new norm, much like we're all going to be driving around our cars with telemetry and we'll get discounts off our premiums or whatever. I think you're going to have to prove that you are, how would you put it nicely? Probably doing all you can to, treat your customer data, your environments with respect and make sure that, you're not just sort of letting it run away on you, just even line and length things like updating and patching and stuff, but then there's a more to it, proper edge security, those things that sit in an environment. And I don't think you'll get a cyber insurance policy probably without it, or if you do, you'll be paying a horrendous premium, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting world as we move forward. Obviously this year, with more people at home, I've been talking about it for ages. The sophistication of these attacks has increased tremendously. So we've definitely got to prepare for that. And as vendors, we've got to build that into our platforms, which then you guys can take advantage of. But just like for me, just going back to some favorite episodes, I mean, and I'm happy to name, I actually quite enjoyed, this is another theme I think that came through, was a Kubernetes theme, surprisingly. Probably no surprise there for a lot of people, right? But speaking to Neil Creswell from Portainer, that was quite interesting in terms of what he's done, tracking his company rise there and going from basically a free tool to an enterprise tool to manage containerization and add an additional option in that space. Obviously the Kasten talk, I think, speaking with Niraj, I've said this openly and I've posted this on LinkedIn when I posted the links, I think that was probably my favorite conversation in terms of just this whole new world, and basically Niraj level setting it as well. He's got obviously some really deep experiences in that particular world as we move from infrastructure traditional to this more sort of container-based infrastructure. I don't know if you listened to that episode, but I thought that was really an insightful one as well.
Yeah, I did. I mean, that was one thing I'd listed on my list was Kubernetes. Obviously, there's varying degrees of maturity of its use throughout the world. I mean, I know New Zealand is normally, and Australia normally head on sort of cloud adoption.
Yeah.
But my gut feel is that we're behind on kind of the cloud native adoption.
Strange. It's kind of flipped.
But yeah, it has. And I'm not sure why, but I'm sure someone's got a good view on it. But like Kubernetes, we can't ignore it. I mean, you see even vendor hardware now shipping with basically Kubernetes in it that runs all of its own software components for good reason. So the Kasten one's, I mean, obviously a great acquisition by Veeam for starters, because much like we all need to back up virtual or physical workloads through traditional backup products, that's now going to be the new norm is backing up these cloud native environments. And traditionally it's been hard, right? So really good conversation with him. And I've obviously listened to a lot of other bits and pieces from conferences and stuff. It's a super interesting product that I'm yet to kind of dive into fully. I've had a bit of a play, but that was a really good chat.
Yeah, and I think as well, a bit left of field, like functionally with Tim Brewer, like that was an interesting one. That was if you look at the sort of theme of the companies, that was a sort of left of field. Tim, good friend of mine, gone out and started a company based on what he knows best, which was basically it's like almost like a HR SaaS product to basically manage and take away the pain of HR. That was an interesting one because he's trying to solve a problem that exists, but there wasn't really an addressable market for. So I'm really interested to see where that company goes functionally in a couple of years. And I think also one of them, I was thinking about what was the most technical conversation I had where I felt I was slightly out of depth in the conversation. And that was definitely the
Surely it was Weka.
The Weka, yeah. That was, I really, I did a lot of research on that beforehand. I mean, look, obviously, a lot of my storage knowledge comes from pain of dealing with really, really bad storages over the years. And I think I left the industry at a time when the new wave of storage hadn't really taken hold. I think of the Pures, I think of the Nimbles. We were still dealing with monolithics, still dealing with headers, backing onto something. So I approach that episode from the point of previous pain and experience, but just able to lead the conversation there in a way which I think we got deep into what the tech was, but fundamentally trying to also explain what they were trying to solve. And I think Weka was a great example of, and I think very honest about it as well. Not saying that it's a company for now, but a company for like 5 to 10 years. I thought that was a really interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you start talking about taking over Linux kernels or whatever, like you've lost me. But man, obviously some super clever people there doing some fantastic things. And like you say, maybe not a technology for now for everyone, but there's certainly like that's a real niche market that, like when we talk big data, we're talking massive data sets, not kind of hundreds of gigs or hundreds of terabytes. We're talking these massive data sets that need to perform and be able to scale, especially when we're talking about running AI things on them. Obviously, we've seen GPUs just take off, with its speed, and they just keep doubling, in size, and every 6 months it seems it's, NVIDIA's bringing out a newer, greater video card. So even if they're only hitting those small niches, it's still touching a lot of people because, if you think about a pharmaceutical company or something like that trickles down to everyone globally. And then no doubt there'll be little bits of these products, even if it's only 10, 5, 20% of the product that sort of trickles down to maybe other kind of enterprise or consumer products. They're doing some great things. Definitely.
Yeah, that was Laurent Zwiebel there. That was a crazy conversation, actually. Like you could just tell, really smart man, right? Like next level smart, and that was really interesting. But I think, to that point, that's what I found really cool about this series. I got approached from certain people to, like a Weka just came out of left field, right? And by the way, if you're interested in being on great things with great tech, you can go to launch.gtwgt.com or actually go and just hit me up on Twitter. So we're always looking for what's coming in 2021. Thought I'd get that plug, and I usually do it at the start. And subscribe as well. That's a big one there. With that out of the way, but I think just having that sort of left of field company on was really good. And then I had a couple of cloud management portals as well. Had OnApp, had Hyalto. That was really cool. That's totally in our space. I mean, for guys that aren't like you, that are developing front ends themselves, Hyalto and OnApp offer a real easy turnkey solution to be able to offer a cloud management front end. That now kind of goes beyond just vSphere infrastructure for providers. That's an interesting world in itself. I myself personally have the attitude that I've always had is that you let providers differentiate and sort themselves out, or sink or swim by what they're able to produce from the software, how great they're able to leverage that software. But what I've found more recently is that a lot of providers just really don't have the scale, the ability, or the impetus to develop their own front end. And that's where guys like Hyalto and OnApp come into play. I mean, what are your thoughts there? Because obviously you're front and center creating a really cool console and front end for vBridge. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, super impressive, particularly because, like OnApp being able to like controlling multi-hypervisor space is just crazy. Even just trying to keep up with the cadence of changes between those platforms, the amount of resource it must take to keep on top of that, test it, is impressive. And even the other little bits and pieces they're adding, like I think it was OnApp had the kind of like what VMware Air Cloud Air or whatever it was, you could join the clouds and consume compute, whatever they had a term for it.
Yeah, I didn't know they did that. That was like a surprise. That was like, it's great how getting surprises, and it was a really smart idea. It's like almost like a cloud marketplace as such. Yeah,
I mean, I had a few questions around how it actually worked, like how you connect into it? Is it internet delivered, or do you buy a megaport pairing, or like, I don't know how. There's a few queries around how it all worked, but it sounded awesome and very impressive that they kind of managed to string it all together. And it would be great to dive a little bit further with them around kind of a bit deeper anyway around why they made it. There must have been a niche, or someone must have had surplus compute or something. I mean, they obviously built it for a reason.
It's surplus compute, right? The promise there has always been that way. I remember being at a VMware vForum back in, it must have been 2010. And it was like, our cloud is your cloud, or any cloud, or one of those things, right? And it was basically based on what Optus was doing around the one cloud. I think it was one cloud. So the idea even back then was that you had a workload of VM sitting on one provider, and then you're able to magically move it to another provider and just basically have it working there, right? The reality of that still isn't really real. Like, I think probably containerization and Kubernetes offers the closest thing to that. When you see what Kasten can do with regards to, you know, moving and replicating a service from literally one cloud platform to another, that's like kind of where it's at. But 10 years ago, it was about that VM. But my whole thing was, providers want stickiness, right? So if you give the consumer the ability to move a workload easy, then that's actually a real negative to the provider, because they lose a customer. But then I thought, from a consumer point of view, the billing must be a nightmare. Like, how do you keep up with it? Like, there's just so much that I think fundamentally doesn't work with that idea, no matter how utopian it is.
No, definitely. I mean, billing's always a nightmare for starters. I don't think that'll ever go away. I don't think everyone ever enjoys billing. Obviously, everyone likes the outcome of it, but it's a pain. It really is. But yeah, the whole multi-cloud thing. And I mean, again, like myself, building cloud portals, OnApp and Hyalto and things, very similar, but all very different. Very different people behind it, very different drivers of the reason they're building those functionalities. You know, that some of them go deep on product X or down a rabbit hole there, and others don't even touch that. You know, there were several, like the whole multi-cloud thing, that we haven't touched yet. We're likely to get there, but yeah, until there's a need for us. And that's why I think I kind of alluded to it earlier about the different geographies and different sizes and the types of customers kind of drives a lot of those innovations. You know, there's always a need, and like I said, there's sometimes shortfalls, or there's often shortfalls. So you just build, right? And that's what's neat about software and people. We can do some neat things.
And that was the idea again. Just to reiterate, I think when we look at this show, what I was trying to do was, when I was at Zettagrid working on, and Zettagrid was episode number 1. I went low hanging fruit, and I felt like almost I was answering the questions there a little bit as well, which was quite funny. Like, I was asking and answering them, because obviously I had a real intimate knowledge of what was going on. However, I think what I stood back at the time and thought was, you know, Zettagrid was doing some great stuff like other providers with the technology that we had, with the software that we had, but we weren't really getting the kudos that I think we deserved for the greatness. And I thought of the developers sitting there in the back office of Zettagrid. You know, developers by and large don't like the public. They don't usually, you know, go for that public sort of affirmation. But I felt like there was, at some point, the stories needed to be told. Going through the history, there was some really interesting history that we went through. Like, you know, I like to start the show with history and facts. And that's really just a pointer to the fact that I think a lot of the ways that these companies started, I mean, there's some similarities, and we saw that. There was a theme around, you know, some of the companies, the way that they started, you know, born out of something specific, then pivoting. But there are also some great stories. I think of Webair was an interesting one in that print house where they got their first gig. You know, so that's part of the show as well, is to sort of get an understanding about where the companies came from and their why, effectively. So, you know, and some laughs along the way. I had a great laugh.
I mean, like you mentioned pivots there, you know, like there were some big pivots too. I mean, and companies that weren't necessarily just 10 years old or 15 years old, you know, there were companies that have been around since the 80s, you know, and a lot of them kind of stem from, we created websites, which is nothing like their business today is probably no web design. I forget the name of the company, but it was the people that did all the training and stuff for VMware and
that was comdivision. Comdivision with
Comdivision. I mean, I've never even heard of them, and they're obviously massive. Just never had a chance to use their stuff, but I've probably used it inadvertently by consuming content from wherever.
Exactly.
And I mean, and really interesting kind of journey. They've sort of went from a, you know, web design to IT consulting, and then kind of flipped it on its head and kind of taught people how to become consultants or set up their environments and almost become like like a university or a learning institution of some description.
Yeah, and that was amazing. One of my left of field ones as well. I think Yves that was a great conversation actually, because obviously it was deep in VMware, but the interesting part there about is where he wanted to go. Take that same sort of model that he'd built over the last sort of 3 or 4 years and take it to new clouds, new platforms, and just kind of work through it. So that was a really cool one as well. All right, well, I said that we wouldn't take more than 30. We're kind of on that edge. I think, it's been great. The retrospective of 2020 has been awesome. Next year, so something that's really amazing I've found is that I've had just left of wing people and companies acquire about being on the show, which I think is pretty humbling. So that's great. So already I've got like a great list of episodes to start in probably February. I'm going to take a little bit of a break and kick off in February. Again, I've got everything from, again, obviously a few service providers. I've got more storage companies doing some cool things with new tech. I've got a couple of Bitcoin companies that have popped through.
That'd be cool.
Get that again, just to pop through. The wide variety will continue. And I'm looking forward to continuing to tell the stories. Just some quick stats as well. What's really cool is that, it's hard to build these things up, but the following that I've had in terms of the actual podcast has been really encouraging. And every episode there, if you go to anchor.fm/GTWGT, you can see all the episodes there. You can play them, but you can also play them on every podcast. I mean, it was the first time I saw the episode on Spotify. I got a bit excited. I won't lie. I'm not Josh Rogan, obviously, or the Prince Harry. I think got some sort of exclusive with Spotify as well. That came up on my feed today, which I was a bit annoyed with. But we've done about 1,200 listens of the podcast. That's pretty cool. When you look at YouTube, really awesome to see about 9,000 views on YouTube. So, I think that just shows that these episodes are valuable for some people, and I'm really humbled that many people are listening to the episodes. So that's pretty cool.
No, it's great. I mean, it's interesting. I consume it through YouTube personally, unless I'm in the car and watch Spotify works, but it's great content to just consume on YouTube because you can just kind of watch a conversation happen. If I'm on the trainer in the garage or something, it's like perfect to fill in those little spots. It's good. And you got to tune in to see if you were in the same jersey, of course, Anthony.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I do wear the same one. I play cricket, and through my cricketing, I'm a very superstitious person. So as long as this t-shirt is not so stinky, I'll continue to wear it and keep it going, even through the hot days. I think February might test. Even though I've got air conditioning in this room that works, wearing it in a 40 degree day might prove a bit challenging, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, or if Veeam rebrands, you won't be allowed to wear that one. You'll have to wear a different one.
Well, the thing about it is I never actually show I never actually show the Veeam logo on it because I try to keep it low because this is obviously agnostic to Veeam, and we love talking about all great companies. But I love having a chat about Veeam on it as well. All right, with that, let's wrap this one up. Thanks, Ben, for coming on. I appreciate you as well, obviously, being on the show proper in episode 2. Thanks to all of the guests, all the companies this year. I'll put basically a list of the episodes in the show notes, put some highlights. And with that, that's 2020 done, and looking forward to what is coming in 2021. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
See you later. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.